just want to celebrate men today, men of integrity and valor and leadership, and we're just glad that you're a part of what we do at LifeChurch. I had to read a little bit about the origins of Father's Day, Anybody here from Spokane? Anybody from Spokane? Give us a shout out. There it is. Father's Day started in Spokane back in 1910. You probably weren't alive yet then. Anybody? I mean, that's where it started. Spokane, Washington, 1910. That's where the whole thing got going. And here we are today. I think the men were just jealous that moms got a day and we had to have our day. And so today's the day, men, when we're going to celebrate you and go out and eat, and you get to pay for it. Yeah. A few weeks ago, we posed the question to all of you. We asked you to respond on those Connect cards. What does the Bible say about? And we got just incredible responses from all of you. And it was amazing. There was a variety of questions just asking about what does it mean to honor our parents. I thought that was really a curious question. I thought people would ask more questions maybe about, alcohol and just maybe the second coming of Jesus and all that kind of thing. But there were a lot of questions about honoring parents. And so over the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to study some of these things. And I thought, what an appropriate day, Father's Day, to just talk about what it means to honor our parents. And so this is where we're going to go a little bit this morning as we talk about this thing. And I've never tackled this whole subject before. We know that it's in the Ten Commandments, this whole thing about honoring our parents. And sometimes parents, we know how to pull out the weapons of the Bible when our kids are being rebellious. The Bible says honor your parents, whole kind of thing. We understand that. Out of the 10 Commandments, honoring your father and mother, that's number 5. And I think the placement of this commandment is really, really interesting. The first 4 commandments deal with submitting to God, surrendering to God, coming under the lordship of God, letting be the leader of our life, having respect and honor for God, and coming under that whole leadership of God. And then he follows that up with coming under the authority and the leadership of our parents. Just that the placement of it was really interesting. And then the 5 that follow after honoring your parents is about committing murder and adultery and coveting and lying and stealing and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, this is really an interesting placement because maybe if we got the first 4 right, come under the authority of God, and then get this other thing right, coming under the authority of our parents, maybe we'd get the rest of them right. What do you think? I just thought it was an interesting placement that was in there. So here's kind of the question that we have to answer, though, in this whole thing about honoring our parents. Here's the question. Are all parents honorable? And you already have a question. You already have the answer to that. Because you're looking at that question, are all parents honorable? All of you have got a parent story. Some of you had amazing parents. Some of you don't know your parents. And some of you have stories about your parents. The other question we have to answer is, well, if they're not all honorable, can all parents be honored? And I think they can. But you understand that honor is something that we don't say. It's something that we do. It's something that we demonstrate. It's not even always something that we feel. And I think that honor really just means that we're going to love when love is costly. And you know this. When you think about your parents, come on, I just bring up parents, and you've already got a word picture in your mind of who your parents are. And parents, sometimes loving our parents can be a very costly thing for us. And I thought about this for a little bit. I thought, this is going to be kind of a hard thing, AJ, to talk about honoring our parents and why we should honor our parents. So I kind of camped out on this. I sat in my office contemplating the thought for a long, long time. I thought, Lexi, why do we need to honor our parents? Because anytime you preach a message up here, it's always why. Why do you care about what I'm going to say? And so here's what I did. I thought, if I want to know why we should honor our parents, I should ask a student. And so I asked one of the children of our staff. I asked Ben Weeks. He's 13 years old. And I said, Ben, the Bible says we're supposed to honor our parents. But why? And he looked at me just dumbfounded, and he goes, because it just makes sense. So let's close in prayer. I don't really have anything else to say, right? And Jesus tells a story. And I thought, this story, I think, exemplifies honor. And it's a familiar story to us. And when Jesus first tells this story, his audience would have been shocked by the story that he tells. It's a familiar story to you, but his listeners would have been shocked. And we can kind of gloss over the story. We've heard the story so many times. We pretty much know the story by heart, or we've heard the story so many times. But we miss some things if we don't understand the culture in which Jesus tells the story. We know Western culture. We're from the United States. We know what goes on here. But if we went to the Oriental culture, if we went to the East where Jesus did his ministry and heard this story, we would have been shocked when we heard it. And the amazing thing about this story is the word honor never appears in the story, and yet the story is drenched with honor and dishonor. It is filled with the meaning and the value of relationships and respect and submission and dignity and surrender, all of which I think are a part of the whole concept of honor. And the story demonstrates what it means to honor somebody or dishonor somebody. So if you want to follow along, you know this story. It's in the book of Luke. We've got Matthew, Mark, and then Luke. You'll find it in the book of Luke, chapter 15. You probably are going to turn to Luke chapter 15, and there might be a little subheading about this story, and it calls it the story of the prodigal son. And it's interesting that we don't use the word prodigal in our vocabulary very much, because I don't know if we even know what it means, but it means to be lavish with or to be generous with. And the story is, interestingly enough, not about the son at all. It's about his dad. It's about his dad. And so the story goes like this. We're going to begin in Luke chapter 15, verse number 11. Jesus is standing amongst the crowds, and it just simply says, Luke says, Jesus told a story. There's a man that he's got two sons. He's got two sons. If there's two sons, there's an older son, obviously, and there's a younger son. If you're the older son in the family, you're probably business-minded, serious, and just boring. If you're the younger son in the family, let's party and have a great time, okay? That's just kind of the way it is. And Jesus knew that. And so he tells a story. Verse 12, he says, the younger son, he told his father, he says, you know what? I want my share of your estate now, before you die. And so the father agreed to divide his wealth. I mean, Jesus telling this to the culture in the day, the shock value would have been amazing right there. His listeners would have been, what? Before he died, he requested this? Yeah, he did. He did. And here's what you need to understand. What the son requests in dad dividing the estate was not breaking the law, but he was breaking a heart. He was breaking a relationship. And not just a relationship with his dad, but it's going to be a relationship with his dad, his brother, the hired hands, the community, the village, all of these people. And so dad divides the wealth. Now, the younger son gets a third of the estate. So he goes about dividing this up. And I want you to understand this as dad divides his inheritance. He gives him a third. And this isn't about going to the bank and taking out cash. There were no banks. And so dad is now dividing. He's taken a third of his land, a third of his livestock, a third of the real estate. He's taken a third of all of this stuff, and he's handing it over to the younger son. And instantly, you understand this? Instantly, the whole family's affected by this. The hired hands are affected by this. The village is affected by this. The family's affected by this. Everybody instantly, a third of the land is taken out of production. A third of the animals are gone. A third of the hired help is gone. Everything instantly changes overnight because of this one decision that the young man makes. And then because the inheritance isn't in money, it's in land and buildings, it's going to take some time to liquidate this stuff. And you understand that the biggest heartbreak in this verse right here is essentially the younger son comes to dad and says, Dad, I can hardly wait for you to die. The younger son has rejected dad's love. He's rejected dad's covering. He's turned his back on the family dignity. He's saying, you know what? I don't want to stay under your covering and trust you for my care. I want to go be independent and do my own thing and trust myself for my care. So he's really forfeited his identity. He's forfeiting his security. And so he goes to liquidate the land assets, probably in the story. Understand it's not a cash thing. And if you want to liquidate, understanding in the Oriental culture, you could negotiate for days or even weeks over the tiniest piece of property that was just a cultural thing. But if you want the money in a hurry, you settle for pennies on the dollar. I think that's what the young son does, because I want my money and I want it now. Verse 13. A few days later, this younger son, he packed all his belongings. He moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money on wild living. Jewish tradition said that if you wasted your money in the Gentile nations, you were no longer welcome back in the community. And so, in fact, they would have a ceremony. If you wasted all of your money in the Gentile nation and you squandered all the money, and then you wanted to come back to the village again, they had not a celebration, they had a ceremony called Kazazab. And Kazazab was celebrated, or at least recognized, when the person comes back to the village and they want back in like they've lost all their money. Kazazab would take place, and the whole village would come to the town gate where you would enter in. And they would take a pot, a clay jar, a clay vessel, and they would smash it on the ground right in front of you. They would declare your name and say, you are no longer welcome to live here again. You shamed all of us. You turned your back on us. And since Jesus says in the story that he's gone far away, the assumption is that he's gone to Gentile lands to waste his money. And the young son gives no thought to how he gained this wealth and all the work of his father and his father's father and the generations before. All he thinks about is the here and the now, and he turns his back on God. Well, as happens in a lot of our lives, a perfect storm comes. Jesus introduces now another tension in the story, verse number 14. About this time, money ran out. I think all of us can relate to that. Why is there so much month left at the end of my paycheck, His money runs out, and on top of that, there was a great famine that swept over the land, and he began to starve. It's kind of a hard concept for us to maybe grasp in our land of plenty. You all drove up in newer vehicles today, or a new vehicle today. You probably had some food in your belly before you came. You'll have some soon after you leave today. We lived in a land of plenty, and it's hard for us to really relate to this part of it. But one thing that we can relate to is that all of us in this room, at some point in our life, has starved spiritually. There's been this aching, this longing for something to be satisfied on the inside of us. We're spiritually starved. Maybe the reason you grew up in a home that was less than ideal was because your parents were spiritually starved and they didn't know where the food could be found. Verse 15 says, he finally persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed his pigs. Really what this is saying, if you go back into the culture, is he didn't persuade him. He forced himself on the farmer. It's almost like sitting in New York City in gridlock traffic, and you can't move, and you're held hostage to the window washers that come out and wash your window. You didn't ask for it, and then they hold out your hand demanding payment. And this guy does the same thing with the farmer. He thrusts himself on the farmer, demanding this job, and the farmer doesn't want to hire him. He doesn't want anything to do with him. So the quickest way to get rid of him, I'll give him the worst possible job that anybody can imagine. I'll make this Jew boy go feed pigs. That'll get rid of him. The story goes on in verse 16. The young man, he became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but nobody would give him anything to eat. Ghrelin, that hormone that creates that hunger sensation inside of you, is a powerfully motivating factor. And it's amazing the compromises you'll make in a diet. You might even eat spinach or broccoli when you're really hungry. This guy wants to eat the pods. We think maybe the pods came from a carob tree, which is so common in the region. And they can take the pods from the carob tree and they can boil it down and make kind of a treacle out of it and feed the pigs. And the pigs can, because of their digestive system, get some nutritional value out of the pods. But human beings aren't able to digest pods from a carob tree. So it would have done them no good to eat those anyway. You know, it's interesting that when we try to honor ourselves, we really dishonor ourselves. Well, desperate means call for desperate measures. The young man's thinking about this aching, burning sensation in his gut. And he's thinking about his stomach. He's not thinking about a broken relationship. He's not thinking about betrayal. He's not thinking about dad. He's not thinking about any of that. This rumbling that's going on. He comes up with a plan. Verse 17. He comes to his senses and he says to himself, he says, at home, even the hired servants, my dad employs all these guys, they have enough food to eat. And here I am dying of hunger. Light bulb moment, verse 18. I'm going to go home to my father, and I'm going to say, and pay attention to the speech now. Look at everything he says in the speech. You need to remember this. Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. Remember all of that. I'm no longer worthy. True. I'm hungry, though. I don't want to assume that I'll ever live in your house. I'll just be one of your hired servants. That's all I'll be. So remember the speech. It's a good speech. This young man, as he would rehearse the speech over in his mind, I wonder if he's thinking at the same time, you know what? It's going to be hard to go home because Kazazab. The whole town's going to see me coming. I'm going to have to eat crow before I eat any kind of food. I'm going to have to swallow my pride before I swallow a morsel of meat. Because they're all going to tell me that I'm not worthy and not welcome to live in that village anymore. And the tragedy, I think, in the story at this point is that he doesn't see what the real problem is. He thinks the problem is his hunger. He thinks the problem is, I'm out of money. He doesn't realize that he's broken the heart of his dad. And that's what sin does to us. We think a lot about ourselves and not much about anybody else. He knows he's going to go home. He's got no hope of living under Dad's roof anymore. He'll live out in the bunkhouse with the boys. He'll eat the same kind of stuff they're eating. It's going to take a lot of humility to do that. I'm ashamed to even go back. I don't think I'll ever feel the value of a relationship with my dad, my family, his servants, the community, the village. But I'm hungry. Verse 20. He returns to his father. This is what I love about the story. I want you to put this on your movie screen. And I want you to see the village over here. And I want you to see this young man coming on a long, winding road, and it's just a wide shot to the whole thing. And as he gets closer to the town, the camera begins to zoom closer and closer as he draws closer to the village gate. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Do you know why he saw him coming? He was waiting for him. He was waiting for him. And his father was filled with love and compassion, and he ran to his son, and he embraced him, and he kissed him. The word that is used for kissed is that he kissed him over and over and over again. He's holding his son. He's kissing his neck. He's kissing his head. He's kissing his cheeks. He's receiving all of this kind of love from God. It was amazing. It was a lot to think about a long ways off. All I could think about was the humiliation and the shame. And here comes my dad running. I put this together, and I thought of an episode of my own life. The longing. Listen, dads, if you're a dad here today, just hear me for a moment. Not to heap guilt on you, but to give you information, okay? When I was in the 5th grade, my parents, I'm visually impaired, so my parents put me down at Grand Forks for the North Dakota State School for the Blind. I lived in a dormitory, boys upstairs, girls downstairs. There was, 40, 60 of us, something like that, all together. And I had a friend who was a year older than me. His name was Tracy. And I remember Tracy's dad, because he was from Cavalier. So from Cavalier to Grand Forks, that wasn't that big of a travel. From Williston to Grand Forks, back in the olden days, the speed limit was 55. It took you 7 days to get from Williston to Grand Forks. And I'll never forget, Tracy had been home on a home visit in Cavalier. Dad brings him back. I could take you right to the spot in the dormitory hallway. Right across the hall from where the dorm mother lived. And I can still see Tracy's dad in his long black trench coat wearing his black fedora hat, bending over and grabbing Tracy and kissing him. And I watched that. And I thought, I wish my dad would do that. Dads, your kids want to get kissed by you. Trust me. It was a long way off, and Dad was waiting for him. And it says he ran to him. Now, this is significant to us because Dad did something dads didn't do back then. He bared his legs. He pulls up his robe. He tucks it into his belt. Men of that stature and dignity never ran. You always walked. And here Dad bares his legs and he runs to him. He sacrifices his dignity. He sacrifices this to, I think he met the son outside of the village. I think he wanted to spare his son the pain of Kazazab. He wanted to get to his son before the village got to his son. He wanted to spare his son's dignity and pride and value and self-worth. And so he runs to his son and he meets him outside of that village. And verse 21 says, the son says to him, now he's going to practice his speech. He starts off and he says, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. And before he could finish his speech, before he could say, Dad, take me on as one of your hired servants, Dad interrupts him, verse 22. His father said, quick, bring my finest robe from the house and put it on him, and get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Come on, go get my best suit of clothes. This guy looks like he's been through the mill. He looks horrible and he smells of pigs. Let's get him cleaned up. Let's put a ring back on his finger, the signet ring, the thing that defines who we are, that we sign things with our dick. Let's give him back some authority again. Let's put the family name back in our son again. Let's dress him up. Let's put some sandals on his feet. Slaves don't wear sandals. This is my son. We're going to give him something to celebrate on this day. That's the way Dad looked at him. And Dad is restoring everything to the son that the son rejected in his dad. And the son's dishonor of his dad was punishable. But look what Dad does. It gets better. Verse 23. One more thing, guys. Go kill the fattened calf. In the language of the time, that means go get the grain-fed cow. Let's go get the best calf that we've been raising. And we've got to celebrate with a feast. Verse 24, because this son of mine was dead. He was dead, but now he's returned to life. And he was lost, but now he's found. And so the party began. Doom, 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 doom. You can hear the music, the beats going. No, 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 no. All this whole kind of thing. And the house is just a rocking and jumping. It's all kinds of great stuff. And what Dad is doing, he's demonstrating to everybody and to his son what it means. He's demonstrating honor. The dad in this story is demonstrating what it means to love when love is costly. Dad sacrifices his dignity, He sacrifices his reputation in the community to go love his son. Well, remember your movie screen's going, and you're outside of the house now, and you can hear the party music going inside. Boom, 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 boom. You want to call the cops because you can't, the whole thing, and then they're just having a great celebration in there. Meanwhile, as the camera pans back a little bit, the music changes because now, off in the side of the picture, here comes Big Brother. And the music changes. Verse 25. The older son was in the fields working, and when he gets home, he heard the music and dancing in the house, and he asks one of the servants, "What's going on?" Like, a party? And I wasn't invited? Like, I should know about this, understand this. You need to understand the culture of the time. In the culture of the time, the oldest son in the family, whenever there was a big celebration in the family, the oldest son becomes the master of ceremony. He becomes the head waiter. And it was his job as the master of ceremonies, as the head waiter, to greet the guests and honor the guest of honor. Ooh, this is a plot twist. It's his job to honor the guest of honor. Guess who the guest of honor is in the house? It's the younger son. Look how the story plays out. The servant says in verse 27, "You know what? Your brother's back." He was told, and your father's killed a fattened calf, and we're celebrating because his safe return. He's all happy. We're having a party, and I'm eating a lot of beef. That's great. Verse 28, the older brother was angry, though. Wouldn't go in. So dad comes out and begs him, "You need to come into the party. Come on, you need to come into the party." Wait, Dad, wait. You are asking me to come into the celebration, and you want me to serve my younger brother. The younger brother that betrayed you, betrayed me, betrayed the family name, that squandered your money. You want me to go serve that brother. If you want me to do that, I don't think so, Dad. Verse 29, but look. Son, he says, "Dad, all these years, I've slaved for you, and I've never refused to do a single thing for you that you told me to do. And in all that time, you never even gave me a goat to celebrate with my friends." Oh, I love the gratitude there. Yet, Dad, the story goes on, when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, we don't know if he did or not, you're going to celebrate by killing the fattened calf? Really, Dad? Really? You know what's interesting in that statement? He couldn't even call him his brother when this son of yours comes back. Can't even call him a brother. He couldn't accept what his brother had done. He couldn't accept his brother. He couldn't even celebrate with his dad. And you know what? Unwittingly, the older son dishonors his father worse than the younger son. Verse 31. His father said to him, look, dear son. Look how he speaks to him. Dear son, he says, you've always stayed with me, and everything I have is yours. It's true. Son, one day when I'm not here, all of this that you see will become yours. You know that. You can enjoy all of it right now. Everything that I have is yours. But the older son, I think the reason he's mad is because Dad is taking my future inheritance. He's taking what is mine and using it to celebrate him. And Dad, I wish my brother was dead, so you wouldn't be using up what's rightfully mine on that kind of a person. But Dad says, you know what? We had to celebrate this happy day. You know why? Because your brother was dead, and now he's come back to life, and he was lost, but now he's found. And that's what it means to honor. And that's what it means to dishonor. Exodus chapter 20, verse number 12. You know this. You memorize this somewhere in your life. Honor your father and mother, and then you'll live a long, full life in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now, if you read that commandment right there, and you look at the lives of the two brothers, which of the two brothers do you think lived a longer, fuller life in the land God had given him, the older or the younger? And I think it was the younger, because he came back to a place of submitting and surrendering and accepting the costly love of his father. His question again: is every parent honorable? You already know the answer to that question, because some of your parents did things to you that no parent should do to a child. Some of your parents didn't do things for you that parents ought to do for a child. And then the follow-up question is this: well, maybe not every parent is honorable, but can every parent be honored? And I think if we act the way the father did in this story, the answer is yes. I think if we act the way the younger son did in the story, I think the answer is yes. In a Father's Day, one son walked away but came home, and one son who was home walked away. And in the story, a father offers love before it was deserved, and when it was needed most, it was received. And that's the story of God's love for us, isn't it? God offered costly love to us when we deserved it the least. And we honor God when we say yes to receiving his gift, and his name is Jesus. He wants to give your life and my life dignity and value and purpose, filled with forgiveness, to redeem us and to love us. And I thought about that, and I thought, when God wants to do that for us, what an honor to be loved by the Father. Honor comes when costly love is offered and accepted. And I thought, just as we close today, whom do you need to honor the same way? Maybe it's a matter of forgiving a parent. Your parent might be long deceased, long ago, but there's still been a wound and a hurt that you've carried for all these years. Maybe your parents are still around. You just don't want to talk to them, you don't like them, you don't care for them, they hurt you, they wounded you. Do you need to offer a costly love to them? And the story that we just read about this father and the son, you know, because you've been at Sunday school and church long enough, you know that the father in this story is our Heavenly Father. He waits for his kids to come home. And you know what? When the younger son comes home, he deserved punishment. He deserved banishment. He deserved the kazazah. He deserved it. But instead, Dad runs to him, and instead of rebuking him, punishing him, he hugs him, and he kisses him, and he offers him costly love. Let God honor you today. Would you just let God honor you? Would you just accept the love that God has for you? Honor was demonstrated by the love of the Father as an example to how to treat each other. What about you? What about you? You know what? I can't think of anything more honorable to your Heavenly Father than today to say yes to him and say, Jesus, I just come under your lordship and I come under your leadership. I come under your lordship and your leadership. What an honor to your Father to say, I surrender and I submit to you. To some of us, it's going back to our parents, maybe a phone call, maybe a note, maybe a letter saying, Mom and Dad, I never appreciated you as much as I should have. I recognize, in fact, the word honor, when it says honor your father and mother, that word honor means weightiness. It is recognition of what your parents go through and what they bear on their shoulders to raise up a child. And if we can't submit and surrender to our parents, how can we submit and surrender to a God? Today, maybe it's offering forgiveness. You know, Mom and Dad, listen, maybe there's an apology that needs to be made to one of your children. Because your approach to come on, Mom and Dad, we are not perfect. We mess up. Never underestimate the power of an apology.